Well, yeah, I mean, Geralt, one of the interesting things about Geralt, it's very similar to Kratos. I tend to like characters like this, I think, because of my own career history. But they, early on with Kratos, they had him having sex mini games with women.
Mhm.
He'd encounter along the way, and people freaked out. Oh, this is so misogynist and all that stuff. But if you actually looked at the scenes and understand what the sexual morality of Sparta was, the scenes are mostly audio. It pans away,
Mhm.
focused on the woman's pleasure. And he is just basically a dildo with a pulse to
Mhm.
those women. He goes in, he basically does his duty, lie back and think of Gaia. And he is not, he has physical sensations, but in terms of emotional fulfillment, no, he's doing a job.
Mhm.
In Sparta, you were expected to repopulate the species because so many men died.
Yeah.
But Geralt has the same thing. I needed fanboys to point it out to me, and they didn't. They said, no, read the stories, read the books, read the short stories. Here's a fan translation. Don't judge them by the game because of the sex cards and everything like that in the first game. Then I'm just like, oh, come on, you call them freaking conquest cards. Conquest, really? And like, no, read the books. And I did. And it's like, oh, okay, this guy's got some damage.
Mhm.
And it comes out in the fact that he just lets women use him because witchers are sterile. He's not going to give them a disease and they're not going to get pregnant.
Mhm.
That's a, that's how I think he sees some of himself in Triss, which is why he does kind of pity her,
Mhm.
because he understands loneliness. And that's why Triss, as frustrating as she is in the books, as spineless as she is at times, is a good supporting female character, because it allows that, one, it allows us to see that Geralt isn't just, screwing every woman and can only relate to a woman sexually.
Mhm.
But also it allows us to kind of contemplate the more loser side of him. And I know people are going to be, well, Geralt's not a loser, girl, because they see themselves in him. It's like, no, the reason Geralt's a good character is he does have, like you said, a dork streak.
Mhm.
And you don't see that in characters of that type a lot. And I do think it was deliberate. I think that a lot of people have trouble parsing the epic Eastern European Polandishness of the Witcher books.
Mhm.
Uh, but when you realize that, I think it was published in 93, the first collection.
I believe so, yeah.
Poland had just gotten independence from the Soviet Union in 91.
Mhm.
And there is a rape phenomenon in Poland
Mhm.
where the statistics on rape of girls under 13 in Poland is utterly shocking. Because of course you've got a history, and this is, Sapkowski denies it's allegory, but this is all through the books. The
Mhm.
the Nazis came in and did horrible things, and rape was one of the horrible things the Nazis did.
Mhm.
But they're allowed to talk about that. They couldn't talk about the fact that the Russians came in and did the exact same thing.
Mhm.
Because the Russians were the great liberators, right? Oh no, you had to praise Russia. And a lot of the stuff with the warring kingdoms in, I always want to call it Niflheim, but
Nilfgaard.
Nilfgaard, thank you. And then Temeria, and same new boss, same as the old boss kind of
Mhm.
stuff. That it may not have been intentional allegory, but he was certainly writing what he knew
Yeah.
as a a guy who'd lived through that.
And Nilfgaard is very much inspired by the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
which the show really did not understand, because they keep talking about how, oh, Nilfgaard is some backwater place from the south. And it's like, do, do you
Yeah, that was weird.
even the books address that, like the Roman Empire, they brought in infrastructure and they brought in
Yeah.
enlightenment. Well,
Well,
a bit of enlightenment.
certain types of sciences, maybe not moral enlightenment, but
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
education that previously hadn't existed in the region. Yeah.
exactly. And so to erase that, it's when people try to do social commentary, which the Netflix Witcher absolutely is.
Oh yeah.
When they try to do social commentary, but they don't understand history, and they especially don't understand the context of something like The Witcher, which is so steeped in inspiration from history.
Hmm.
Like I would say in Calidus Chronicles, my coding for like the Roman Empire and everything is much more obvious than you get with something like The Witcher, which
Right.
you kind of have to pay attention. I'm not subtle, guys. I'm sorry, I'm not subtle.
But I mean, there are some things like I felt hit with the hammer with some of that allegory, and okay, allegory, bad word, write what you know, the same way there's sort of a Mormon sensibility in Twilight, even though it wasn't intended to be Mormony vampires. People's experiences end up in the story. And the idea of empire isn't limited to the Romans, though there was some Roman movement in that area back in the day. I mean, God, people were rolling in and out of that part of the world for like a millennium.
and
And I,
and
I
so it may not have been deliberately Roman. It may have just been, oh, this is what happens when an empire builds, because like
right.
we've seen it throughout history. But it, to for the show to say, oh, this is just a backwater country, how are they? Apparently, the foreskin armor, the idea behind that was that it's supposed to be armor they can throw together as they're conquering lands and conscripting stuff
Right, right.
people, which they only had 2 months in costumes instead of 6, which is why the first season especially is a disaster. But so if you're doing so.
I admit it didn't take away the costumes not looking super great. Mm, It's funny because the costumes in Rings of Power bothered me more, but I don't want to derail on Rings of Power because we could just
Oh,
go on a rant on
okay,
that.
but The Witcher had $10 million per episode.
Really?
Uh-huh. Of
Well, I mean, some of that's going to salaries and sets.
course, but I just don't think they also didn't consult the VFX artists when they were building sets.
No.
So it's like they would build the sets and then VFX would come in and be like,
Oh
wait,
my God.
this whole production was a fucking nightmare.
Well,
And
it's interesting because when they blow the understanding of a character, you start hearing about the nightmare behind the scenes. And it's like, yeah, one tends to tie into another.
So it's like I'm not even surprised when I was learning this, but it's just everything that adds up. And it, I some of it is going to be Netflix, who was,
a lot of it is Netflix. I
yeah.
mean, they choose who's going to run the thing.
But there is also the showrunner who straight up says, oh, well, everything has to go through me, I approve everything. And then she's kind of mocking the Eastern European composers from the first season, like, oh, they kept showing me these old instruments like hurdy-gurdies and be like, oh, this is what would make that sound. And it's like, okay, whatever. And I'm like, and blaming the costume designer who was fired after season 1. And I'm like, lady, you need to take some accountability here.
Well, yeah, and also like, hey, they didn't have a lot of time. Show some class.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think this is a shining example of you're not necessarily the best judge of your favorite character when you're adapting something. This is something I'm very aware of in my own work. that am I trying to force this character that I do see identification with? Am I trying to force them into being an ideal of mine, or am I letting them be a character on their own with some interesting edges? And I think that what she did, that for some odd reason she liked Yennefer, but she didn't understand Yennefer, so she just made Yennefer her.
Absolutely.
It's like your first D&D character mistake. Everybody makes their first D&D character into basically as OP'd a Mary or Gary Stew as you possibly can. Everybody
Absolutely.
does it. As you go along, you start deliberately playing characters who are not like you, that aren't wish fulfillment. They're experiments with the game system. And to me, that's when it really starts becoming creative. Because you
I
end up
mean,
doing some fucked up stuff, and it's just really funny.
and I mean, not even just D&D, because like we see that also when kids first start writing.
Yeah.
It stems from write what you know. They don't have a lot of experience with people yet, so they start with themselves.
Yeah. But
and we do get those the wish fulfillment stuff.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be one character is you as a writer. It should be all characters are a piece of you. And the fact that, well, I mean, Triss was such a, well, we need to put her in there. So, just put her in there and she's just going to be nice. And it's like, all right. Triss was sort of, I am not up to date on The Witcher, shall we say. I was so thoroughly unimpressed and angry about what they did to Yen that I'm in no hurry. But, obviously it became the Yennefer show. And do you know the whole story of Harry Winkler turning down a Happy Days spinoff with Fonzie?
No, but good for him.
Yeah, because he recognized that Fonzie worked as a supporting character. And the whole dynamic was as a supporting character, and he didn't think it could carry a series.
And here's the thing, it's especially being in fandom, I've seen a lot of people who were like, oh, I want an entire show or movie about this character. And it's like Phoebe from Friends, I think, the blonde who's always saying weird things.
Right.
The other is Edna Mode from The Incredibles. And I'm like, no.
That's one of the characters I made sure we said female coded, because people get upset with that character because a guy voiced her. So, but I mean, maybe some shorts. I mean, the Doug the Dog shorts were really cute.
Some shorts could work, and like they did do one of Edna with Jack in the second movie. I did not like Incredibles 2. I was so disappointed with that one.
I don't know that I saw it. I don't tend to see the Disney sequels.
It was jarring how they had these very millennial superhero designs for like up and coming heroes with like the colored hair and stuff, and it did not jive with the aesthetic of the movie.
Interesting.
Because like The Incredibles has a very mid-century feel.
Yes.
Harkening back to that
Fantastic Four.
Yeah, and also that golden era of comic books in the 60s and 70s. And like
that would have been Silver Age, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the early Marvel days.
Yeah, so it's this very Silver Age kind of era. And so to jump from that to these very early 2010s designs, mid 2010s designs, was so jarring. And I didn't like the story very much. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I conversely, because I think we sort of buttoned up on The Witcher, why those are actually good supporting female characters. Pivoting to Spider-Gwen in
Sorry for that entire tangent, guys.
No. I thought that was, I mean, it's in, I think it's in topic because Spider-Gwen is an example of one that they did make very modern with the pink hair and the boho haircut in Across the Spider-Verse, but they bothered to make it work instead of kids like this. It's cool, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was a bit worried when Across the Spider-Verse started, that because the opening is her and it's all her and there's no Miles in it. It's like, is this going to be another bait and switch? But then they went to the opening credits and go back to Miles' story, and it actually worked. She is almost a deuteragonist in Across the Spider-Verse, but it works because of the way the stories interweave. And
okay, you're gonna have to define deuteragonist for me.
secondary main character.
Ah.
So, you know, Joel in The Last of Us versus Ellie in The Last of Us. I think I'm pronouncing that word right. It's, you know, it's one of those words you see written all the time.
Yeah.
Rarely.
In academic sources, I have never heard this word before.
Deuteragonist, I was right. The person second in importance to the protagonist in a drama. And if you needed it defined, then somebody else is going to need it defined. And this is why we asked. Because there's the, like in Star Wars, there's protagonist, Luke, deuteragonist, debates whether that's Han or Leia, and then tritagonist. I always jump up the third. So and there's some debate about whether a sidekick is a deuteragonist or a supporting character. It really depends. You know, with something like The Last of Us, Joel, it's early on, it's clearly Joel's story, and that switches to Ellie because reasons something. I think it was a mistake. I think you don't break a successful formula because there's an element of magic there that that just happens. You can't always plan for it, and you don't break it when it works. But with and I think Gwen and Miles are an example of that too.
Yeah. And this is something I was starting to say before I went off on Incredibles 2. There are a lot of characters who work because you know very little about them.
Yeah.
Which is characters like Edna Mode, like Fonzie.
Right.
You don't want too much. They're good in small doses. When you take away the mystery is when that character is going to completely fall apart.
Yeah.
And they can't hold up. To like Edna Mode could hold up in short stories. I would love to see something about her doing a like fashion show and just I used to design for gods. Why am I surrounded by all these puffy lipsticks?
Right. Something that doesn't have to sustain, something that is just good comedy, very little meat. I'd watch that.
Yeah. So it's, but when, and these are the characters that need to stay secondary.
Yeah.
Because they can be golden and they can be scene stealing.
Yeah.
But they're going to fall apart. And honestly, they aren't even secondary characters. They're side characters who usually come in for just a scene or two.
The shining I just finished watching the Castlevania Netflix series. Shining example of that. They had a really good thing going with the main three characters in season 1. And then season 2. Season 1's only 4 episodes, so you could pretty much count season 1 and 2 as like the same story. But
because they did that Netflix thing where they split one season into 2.
They did the Netflix thing. But season 2, I think they introduced Carmilla, who's a female vampire. And none of this is terribly important because she's just a female vampire with every fucking stereotype. Oh, she's crazy and vicious and all that stuff. And it went from this really interesting formula of, because there's Trevor Belmont, who's the playable character in Castlevania 3. And he continues in some ancillary things. And then you've got 2 of the 3 potential secondary playable characters. You can bring like an assistant on in every run of the game. And you have to pick between this elemental sorceress named Sypha, Alucard, who is Dracula's son, and he's got like super speed and attacks and stuff like that. And then they ditch this pirate character that they make little references to, and it's those main three, and they've got a really interesting kind of, they have to work out their differences because, hey, he's half a vampire. His dad was a vampire, and Trevor kills vampires, but Dracula's gone crazy, so they got to work together to kill Alucard's dad. It existed on the head of a pin, but after the first seasons, sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting that you're watching it because my partner has been he's been getting clips of it in his YouTube reels, and he's been sending them to me, and I suspect he's gonna watch it soon.
Well, okay, I'll give him a bit of a warning. The first 2 seasons are a lot of fun. After that, they sideline Alucard for the entire 3rd season, a completely useless 3rd season. You could excise it completely and lose nothing, to focus on this quartet of female vampires surrounding Carmilla, this one who comes in, and when she entered in season 2, I'm like, oh yeah, she needs this. We need a disruptor. We need somebody to start shit who kind of makes sense, because yeah, Dracula is crazy and his plan is terrible. But within 3 episodes, I went from, oh yeah, this is great, to, I am so done with her. Someone please kill her. And it was just overuse. It was just overuse.
This is something that's so frustrating, is there is this tendency, and we've seen the pattern now, of female characters coming in, and the creators, possibly in a we need more female representation, or girls get it done, or something, something pop feminism, we see them completely take over. We saw it with Sylvie, we see it with Ellie, in this
show, though, I don't think so, because 2 of the other main characters they completely change Isaac from the games. He became one of my favorite characters, but again, his story is really kind of superfluous when you think about it. But then they focus on this other, what they call Forge Masters in Castlevania. Only humans can bring demons out of hell, so you need humans. Vampires can't do it. So there's Hector and Isaac, who are these Forge Masters, and they sort of use them as POV characters. Isaac does have a character arc, so at least there's that, but the Hector is eventually useful to the main plot, but it's just like, where is all this going? And the 2 best female vampires that they introduced, they were good characters. They were completely non-essential to the story. It just felt like, because it was the TV show, Warren Ellis has a created by credit. And if you know anything about Warren Ellis, he has a certain formula. And I got the sense that as it went on, he just didn't like Alucard, I think. And I get the eye-rolling elements of that character, but that's when you go, no, lean into it, play the ball where it lies, learn to understand why this character is important to the franchise, because he's been in it more than anyone else. And so I was like, what's going on? Like, he is King Bishi of Castlevania. What the hell are you doing? You put the crying Bishonen in the show so that girls will like him. Why are you sidelining him? If you want to attract women to your show, that is the way to go, not a whole bunch of female characters.
Yeah, no, and that's something so many people miss, is it's like, women will watch something for the hot guy, especially if he's crying.
I'm like, oh fuck. The minute that started, I'm like, here we fucking go. And
okay, I can already see people, I'm saying, oh, a hot guy who's crying. Look, guys, I understand that there is a lot of discussion going around of like, oh, men are supposed to feel their feelings, but if they cry, women shame them. Look, women who shame guys for having emotion suck. They're
Yeah,
not someone you want to be with anyway.
yeah,
They are
stop
extremely
centering those
toxic.
women. Yeah,
Yeah, they are extremely toxic. Don't waste your time with them. There
yeah.
is also the fact that, look, brooding works for some guys.
Which,
Especially if they have the tragic backstory. And this is part of the appeal of the bad boy, is he's tragic, which usually means he probably reads poetry or Shakespeare or something old, and he
yeah,
can talk about his feelings. Not all guys have that. It's also something that's not good for a sustainable relationship. So it's that's TNA for women,
yeah,
essentially. Is,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
my god, it's a man who knows how to talk about his feelings.
Well, and the thing about Alucard is he's actually very awkward with people,
Mhm.
which I thought was an interesting character point, but they used so unevenly and they mischaracterize what I took as a sexual assault as a thing that obviously messed him up at the time, but then he's kind of joking about it. Like it became this huge mess, and I just got the sense that they resented the popularity of the character, and so they put in these female vampire characters, which, okay, full disclosure, uh I have a love-hate relationship with those characters because, when you do corsets and you're pale and a ginger, you end up getting offered a lot of vampire lady number 3 roles.
Mhm.
And I was just like, and it sucked to turn them down, but I there's only so many vampire lady number 3 roles you can do. Um, and so it was like, all right, I'm I'm giving you a chance here, guys. Impress me. And not the best of them. I believe her name's Striga. Uh
Of course it is.
yeah,
Oh my god, that's it. No, it's not the Striga. Never mind. Sorry.
no, that's a monster in The Witcher, but yeah,
Yes,
that's a
I,
monster.
I thought I thought maybe that was the vampire we couldn't
Yeah.
remember the
Well,
name of, but no,
the thing is she's from Poland. She's from what is now
yes,
modern day Poland, a place
yeah.
called Styria, I believe, in the show. But she's the most interesting because she's a different kind of vampire lady. She's this big soldier with this like mane of tousled black hair, and it's cool, and she thinks everybody's stupid, and it's just like she's good. But you've got the redhead with the big gooey eyes who looks like a child, and then you've got these psycho hose beast vampire lady, and they don't do anything with those tropes. And I'm sure this is the point where some guys who watch the show are like, I like them. Well, yes, you like them because they have sex, and Carmilla's got one really great fight, and it's okay that you like them. But in terms of secondary characters that don't eclipse the main characters, there's a point where Trevor, who's the playable character from the game, actually says, I have had nothing to do useful in weeks. And I was like, holy shit, that was self-aware. It you've got Alucard at some point talking to literal dolls of Trevor and Sypha because they isolated him so much from the other events of the plot that he literally had no one to talk to. And it was so bad. And again, there's an example of characters that you may like on their own, but they broke the story by dominating it and shoving the main characters out of the way.
And
And
this is why I think when you do a serialized story, you really need to go in with a plan. And I've softened a bit. I've gotten to the point because I'm serializing a story and shit happens
yeah,
where you don't need to have everything set, but you need to at least have some idea where you're going and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I
Okay,
think,
shit happens, but
yeah.
I do think the thing I cannot stand. Oh wow, two Pedro Pascal played characters got this happening to him, but I think he knew what he was in for with The Last of Us when he signed up. But in both, they did Din's story is told in The Mandalorian. Oh, well, Joel's story was told. No, it wasn't.
No.
What? There was so much more you could do with that character. They liked the cred. They liked the backpats for the female character, not recognizing that you can get away with so much more. Sypha in Castlevania is a shining example. She shits all over Trevor, bosses him around, her power scaling is so screwed up, but you like her because she's this little firecracker and she's funny and she's good at banter. But because it's not like, she never overpowers him, she never replaces him, the fanboys like her. I don't know of anybody who exploded over that character. Even though I'm sitting here going, that she just gets new powers as she goes along for no apparent who cares? I like her, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
And
But
it's like stuff can't like that can be done,
yeah,
especially if the character is well written.
yeah,
The problem is we see a lot of characters who are poorly written and or usually and they're also terrible people. And again, you can have terrible people who are good characters that people like. Seinfeld is a classic for a reason,
right.
but you still need to give people something to like. By the way, the vampire species we couldn't remember was Bruxa.
Thank you. I want to circle back to something you said earlier about men and expressing feelings. Because I admit there are times in Castlevania where Sypha digging at Trevor did make me uncomfortable. I thought it bordered on abuse. And she's a main character, so this isn't a secondary character complaint. She gets a little bit more license because she is one of the main three. But she does, I mean, I was joking on Twitch that she's bossing him around all the time, introducing him as her sidekick, really busting his balls. But people are constantly talking about the fact that he stinks. And I'm like,
oh yeah, you were telling me about this.
Yeah, get your man to fucking bathe, girl. Like, why does he smell like piss? Piss and still beer, that ain't sexy. But but then they have anyway. I thought that went too far, and I thought it was not. That didn't make her strong. That made her arrogant and bossy, and I wasn't sure if that was a deliberate flaw, or if that was sexual fantasy taming of the shrew territory. And I still don't know after it all. I like their overall arc, but there are some problems with dialogue in that show. But it's not as bad for that, men showing emotions, because she does say, oh, toughen up or something like that in places. But nothing's as bad as the final episode of Loki, where he actually adults and says, let's just think about this for a minute. And she uses his affections to manipulate him into helping her kill He Who Remains.
And so here's the thing. So I haven't watched Loki because reasons. Are you like supposed to like Sylvie? Like, is that how the script portrays it, or is it, she's
it's such a mess, I have no idea. And the thing I got was when I started going, what the fuck is this? The name of the show is Loki, not Sylvie. I got people going, I like Sylvie. It's like, you're not supposed to like the mischief god. That's the problem. She's normal girl. She's, oh, he's such a child and everything like that. And so then when he finally does a grown-up adult, hey, let's just consider this choice that will have major ramifications for the universe, she just does something reckless out of anger and it's supposed to be girl power. I was so fucking pissed. And I actually, I mean, it's good art that I struggled with it, and I ultimately determined she did the right thing for the wrong reasons. However, in terms of his, ham-handed redemption arc, but also they've identified in the MCU that a big problem with the Asgardians is they are, emotionally stunted men with daddy issues. He actually had sorry, go ahead.
Here's a bit of a side thing. Does something making you think about it actually make it good art though?
Well, that's the thing, is that they tried, so when you're doing an origin story for a character that is designed to have you relate to them. Mm-hmm. It's the same problem I had with WandaVision, where if I was allowed to think that Wanda was wrong and got away with it and was absolutely a complete shitheel of a person, I would have liked the show better. Because there's another one. She tortures Vision. And again, main character, different thing, off topic. But with Sylvie, a guy like Loki, who in the MCU does have major damage, putting it lightly. He was an adopted person in whose father insisted he conceal what he really looks like. Point one. That's a major character point. P.S. I'm secretly blue.
Which he didn't even know.
No. Like if you think about how much shit this dude, I still maintain Odin is the actual real villain of the original Thor movie. I will maintain that. Because it's Brana, it's Shakespearean. But so here's okay. So the way you look must be hidden. P.S. He's bisexual. In a culture where Norse culture is pretty, it's son or daughter, and you've got this, it's Odin's son, Odin daughter. They even call Sylvie oh god, her last Laufey daughter, but she identifies as being happy with her adoptive parents, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. And she knew she was adopted, so she had a happier childhood than he did, even though it was cut short at the age of 8. But Loki is trying so hard to be the ideal Asgardian man because he's adopted. He has to hide his appearance. I don't know how a shapeshifter doesn't know you've got an illusion on you. You'd think that would interfere with the magic, but this is not about world building. This is about character. But got an adopted, identity concealed, bisexual son of a very alpha male king. I mean, Odin brought the various cultures that make up Asgard together through conquest. And Loki is trying to live up to the example his father set. So him going out and trying to conquer Midgard to make a point that, no, how about you pay attention to me? Yeah, my brother's an idiot. Yeah, you kicked him out. I'm going to be the good son for now. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah.
Him going, fuck you all. What do you mean I'm this thing that you concealed? That screws with you. When your parents have kept that from you, of course he's going to go seek out where he was from. And so he gets manipulated by Thanos. He ends up being mind controlled by the Mind Stone, and the rollout of that Whedon botched. So that's sort of faulty canon. But you've got a guy who's been through some shit,
this is another
what?
But I'm just gonna say this because it's something I'm kind of passionate about. Right. If a child is adopted, don't hide that.
I agree with you.
Because it's, you know, I hear stories about people who they were never told,
Yeah.
and you know there was this big lie about it where it's like, if you just tell your kid from the beginning, like, you know, every kid pretty much gets the story of, oh, the day you were born.
Right.
Like, okay, you can tell the story of, hey, we picked you out specially,
Yeah.
and that way you avoid all this drama
Yeah.
of,
Because there is, oh gee, my parents are liars and were so for
yeah,
years.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's, oh, we're going to tell them at the right time. The right time is before they even know what that means. So
Yeah.
you normalize it for them. And
Right.
I'm just so frustrated every time I see a movie or something where it's like, oh yeah, no, we didn't, because yada yada, we didn't da, da, da. Tell them from the beginning. Tell them before they know what words mean.
Well, and that's especially important in this case because it's the way people justified Whedon incorporating misogyny into Loki's character, like virulent misogyny that didn't previously exist. He was always more connected to his mother than his father. He talked about the fact that she brought him books when he was locked up again. And so they're gradually like grinding this guy down. And so now they're retconning because, oops, we killed the character who was really popular. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. We're going to tell a very convoluted story about how, yeah, he's still dead, but this is a variant who is pretty much almost him because it separates in the Battle of Avengers Tower. And so you've got all this damage, and he's been given how he dies from the TVA, and he's clearly messed up by this. And then he meets this girl and falls for her because they have a moment where she opens up to him and is vulnerable. And it's a shitty written scene that's very well acted. And that's why I'm so frustrated, because I'm like, because I break down dialogue that's written compared to how it's performed while I'm watching things, and because obviously reasons, selfish reasons, but I'm watching Tom Hiddleston just goo eye his way through this horribly written scene. And I'm like, shit, I believe you, dude, even though this is dreck. You know, I remember where he's, you know, the line where he starts giving her a big pep talk, and the line is not something beautiful and lofty and Shakespearean and precise. Precise compliments are so important when you are flattering a woman, you know. But he just goes, "You're amazing." And I'm like, that is so shitty. That's a Taylor Swift line. Don't make me think about the actor dating her in this moment. You know, like, no, amazing. No, but he sells it.
Okay, so in the 2000s there was a Nancy Drew movie.
Yeah.
Oh God, it was Emma Roberts as Nancy Drew. I'm still offended by this.
But this whole "you're amazing" thing as as an affirmation just bugs the fuck out of me.
That's the point, is like the theme song for the movie was "You're pretty much amazing."
Yeah.
And like that was all we ever really got was, oh, Nancy is so cool and she's oh God, they did not understand the character of Nancy Drew.
It's just the ultimate of a guy putting a girl up on a pedestal. You know, it comes to mind the thing Akila says all the time: the wet spot is not love. A trauma bond is not love. And so then it's this moment where he's never been in love before, which I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? He's like supposed to be 900 years old, and this is the first time. Yeah, how does he know what his sexuality is if he has? Is he supposed to have just been doing booty calls and orgies this entire time?
Also, what was the whole thing with Sif then?
Well, that's where it's like, oh wow, they just made that him acting out. That was such a gay boy moment. And they have them sitting down and they're in this scene, and the line is so cheesy. It's like, because they made a big deal about him being a prince, and she goes, is there any princes? And he just says a bit of both, which, okay, that's new to us. I don't think he's told that many people that really, you know, adds a layer to the misogyny he shows Black Widow.
And that feels like fan service, because
Oh,
I've
it is.
seen people joking, oh, now Loki is in a.
Well, they also list him as genderqueer, and I know I've ranted about this, which is wrong. He doesn't identify as, like, in the comics, when he's Lady Loki, she does refer to herself as a she. We haven't seen that in the show. If we're going to drop gender fluid, let's get it right, please. This is hard enough for people to understand as is. And so
and being a shapeshifter does not automatically make someone genderqueer.
Well, that's the difference between identity and performance, right? Like, I was just gnashing my teeth about how badly they fucked it up, because not only have I been increasingly, I mean, I thought the way Brana used him in the first movie was just excellent, and I thought there's a lot of poignant moments, and it's just been downhill ever since. But okay,
Brana.
Yeah, but this is supposed to be a redemption arc. And he's finally, the redemption there is, they keep calling him a narcissist in the show. He's showing he's not, because he's forming a sincere bond with someone. That's very important. But then she toys with his affections, uses him, and emotionally gaslights him in the most horrendous way to commit an act of violence. If this is a guy who had a misogynistic backlash to his mother dying, can you imagine what that's going to do to him?
I mean, it sounds like she's the narcissist here.
Well, she is. I mean, they made her a cold fish narcissist who doesn't really care about anybody, and you can accept that, so, because she's been on the run for over 1,000 years. I don't know how you even conceive of what happens to a person. I mean, she'd have such intense PTSD after that, because she's been hiding in various apocalypses along the time streams. So she hides when a universe is about to get nuked. So she's not affecting time, because the timeline ends there. It doesn't matter. So she's just been living through horrendous event to horrendous event again and again and again. She's not somebody who's going to be going, oh, will you please grow up? You know, she's not going to be the Emma Thompson character. She's going to be, whoa, you're weird. Why are you so weird? I could do that again. This is different. You know, she'd have a weird, she wouldn't be normal. She would not be normal girl McOrdinary face. It was just so fucking botched. And the fact that apparently the writer wanted to do more with her. He wanted to do 2 whole episodes on just her, and Disney went, no. So we got 1 episode and then a bunch of mess. But this is an example of a lot of interesting ideas, horribly executed. And if you want to make a show about a female Loki or Bo-Katan, make a show about that. Don't bring people in for one character whose name is on the show and then do this weird, well, she is a Loki, but she changed her name. And, you know, well, she is a Mandalorian, but it's not the Mandalorian. Like, they didn't change the name to the Mandalorians, plural. Everybody knows that the Mandalorian in question is Din Djarin.
I have a poster of Grogu on my wall, so I just looked over to make sure. Yeah, it's Din Djarin's silhouette.
Yep.
In the logo.
Yeah, he is the Mandalorian in question.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same way Dracula is the vampire and Frankenstein is the guy who made the monster, not the monster.
Mm-hmm.
And and you notice it's never women that do this. It's all male showrunners, and then people start screaming feminist agenda. You know, these guys, they like to co-opt feminism, but this is something that women don't do.
I mean, we have seen it in The Witcher.
in The Witcher, but that was a weird, that's the exception that sort of proves the rule, because most women know you cannot go in and upstage your boss. You can't even go in and upstage your male coworker. You must be agreeable and helpful, or you are a bitch and you will be out on your ass so fast your head will spin.
Okay, but here's the caveat that I'm gonna push back on that a little. How many female showrunners have we seen at the head of these big projects? Because
well, there were some female directors on season 1 of The Mandalorian. Bryce Dallas Howard is the one that comes to mind.
Well, yeah, but I'm not even talking. I'm talking about specifically showrunners, because it's like Lauren Hisrich. I'm absolutely putting a lot of the flaws with The Witcher and centralizing Yennefer at her feet, because she's claimed it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like I said, exception that proves the rule. But again, it was Netflix has a lot of power.
I mean,
it's not like a guy like Dave Filoni or Neil Druckmann who is so synonymous with that brand that they have a lot of power. But I take your point. Your point's valid, but because we can't compare this, because women don't get to direct shows centering men.
If we did have more examples of female showrunners on these big projects like this, I don't think Hisrich would be the exception that proves the rule. I think we would see that it's not so much gendered. It is just kind of the ego that comes when you get to a showrunner role.
Because I don't think women. Okay, now I know what I'm going to say. Hisrich was writing fan fiction with Yennefer because she saw herself in Yennefer.
Absolutely.
These male showrunners and head devs, they're trying to make a point and trying to show they're a not like other guys guy, because they pull this thing of, well, I can handle it, why can't you? When people get upset.
But at the same time, I do think they are coming at it with a similar ideology, which is this idea of centering the female voice to make up for all the times for how long we haven't been allowed to be centered.
Is it centering the female voice, though, or is it centering a female character but still subjecting her to the strictures and requirements that she be more awesome than awesome face? Because it's that quote of, for a woman to be seen equal, she needs to be twice as good as any man,
which I agree with, and I think you're right, but I also think they're coming at it from a direction but doing it badly.